The whole valley was still shaking from the last explosion when the SEALs found her half buried behind a collapsed wall, bleeding through her shirt but sitting upright like she'd just finished a workout instead of surviving a firefight. Dust hung in the air, gunshots fading in the distance, and yet she didn't scream, didn't panic, didn't even breathe hard. The medic sprinted over, sliding beside her, ready to deal with another terrified civilian. But the second his hands touched her shoulder, he froze. Her injury wasn't random. It was controlled, like she'd positioned herself on purpose to take the least damaging hit. And then he saw the way she scanned the field, checking angles, exits, movement patterns. No normal civilian looked like that. No untrained person stayed that calm while bleeding out. Something about her wasn't adding up, and the medic felt his stomach drop. He glanced back at the team, eyes wide, silently mouthing, "She's not who we think she is." They carried her into cover, but even then she wasn't acting like someone rescued, more like someone evaluating them. She gave short, clipped answers, every word chosen with the discipline of someone who'd spent years being careful about what she said. When the SEAL commander asked if she was hurt anywhere else, she shook her head with soldier-level confidence, not the shaky denial most civilians spit out in shock. And despite the blood soaking through her side, she kept her hands steady, her breathing controlled, her gaze sharp and tactical. The medic kept watching her in disbelief, something in her scars, her posture, the way she braced for incoming fire at all-scream training. The kind of training people don't talk about. The kind the military pretends doesn't exist. And as the team realized this woman wasn't just surviving, she was analyzing, calculating, remembering, they felt the tension shift. Whoever she was, whatever she'd been through, she wasn't just wounded. She was experienced, dangerous, and very, very familiar with war. The team had barely cleared the last corner when they spotted her slumped against a chunk of broken concrete, blood dripping down her arm like she didn't even notice it. The firefight behind them was still hot, rounds cracking past, dirt jumping with every hit, but she didn't flinch once. One SEAL yelled, "We got a survivor," and they all rushed in, forming a shield around her as they pulled her out of the danger zone. She moved with them easily, almost too easily, like she'd done extractions before and knew exactly where to step, exactly when to duck. Even injured, she kept checking the rooftops, the alleys, the blind spots, micro-head movements only operators use when they're tracking threats. They laid her down behind a burned-out vehicle, and instead of panicking, she calmly applied pressure to her wound like a pro. No shaking hands, no crying, no confused rambling. She even warned them, left side rooftop scope glint, right before a sniper round cracked past their heads. The SEALs exchanged looks. Civilians don't spot snipers. Hell, half-trained soldiers don't either. Something was seriously off. They'd come thinking they were rescuing a scared survivor, but the more they watched her, the more she looked like someone who didn't need saving at all. The medic dropped to his knees beside her, tearing open his kit like he'd done 1,000 times. At first, he expected the usual shaky breathing, wide eyes, adrenaline crash. Instead, she stared straight ahead, focused, almost bored. He pulled her sleeve up, and that's when his whole expression changed. The wound was fresh, but underneath it, layers of old, deep scars, burn patterns, blade lines, trauma that didn't come from random chaos. These were the exact injury types seen in breaching ops gone wrong, explosive door charges, and CQB mishaps. Stuff only special operations personnel ever face. He pressed on her shoulder to check bleeding, and she didn't even flinch. He felt her pulse steady like someone meditating. To steady. That's when she muttered, "Tourniquets unnecessary. It'll slow me down later." The medic froze mid-movement. Civilians don't talk like that. Even soldiers don't unless they've lived through hell. He checked her breathing pattern, controlled. Pain response suppressed, awareness laser sharp. She wasn't reacting like a wounded person. She was reacting like someone trained to endure pain quietly. Intentionally, he leaned toward the commander and whispered, "She's trained." Highly trained, and the commander stared back at the woman, suddenly unsure who exactly they'd pulled out of that ruin. Once the immediate danger calmed, the SEALs took a closer look at the gear she had strapped to her. At first glance, it seemed random scraps of fabric, mismatched tools, improvised pieces. But to a trained eye, it wasn't random at all. Her tourniquet was hand-tied the same way certain Black Ops units are taught in the field. Her boots were standard issue, but modified for silent movement. Even the way she rigged her broken strap was a very specific wrap used by covert female units overseas. The SEALs didn't even do it that way, but they knew who did. One operator, Joker, held up a tiny folded map she carried. "Bro, this is not civilian stuff." Another found a blade short, custom-filed, meant for close-quarters work. No regular person carries gear like this unless they've lived through serious, classified chaos. She watched them inspect everything without a hint of panic, like she already knew what they'd find. When Joker joked, "Who'd we just save? John Wick's long-lost cousin," she actually smirked, just a tiny flicker, quickly gone. The commander crouched beside her, his tone shifting. "Ma'am, you want to tell us who trained you?" She looked up, eyes cold, steady, and replied, "Not today," and that silence said everything. As the medic cleaned the blood off her shoulder, his cloth slid over a faded tattoo barely visible, almost erased with time. But he recognized it instantly. It wasn't a regular unit mark. It belonged to a classified female strike group the government never publicly acknowledged, the kind whispered about in special forces circles like ghost stories. Operators who vanished after missions, who took on impossible targets, who walked into countries and conflicts completely off the record. Women built for the darkest edges of war. He locked eyes with her, stunned. She held his gaze, almost challenging him to say it out loud. He didn't, but the team saw the medic's reaction, saw the color drain from his face. They crowded around her quietly, not with suspicion, but with reverence. The commander knelt and whispered, "You served there." She didn't nod, didn't smile, didn't boast. She simply said, "A lifetime ago," and that tiny sentence dragged the whole team into a heavy silence. The air shifted instantly, even the dust seemed to hang still. No one asked another question, no one dared. That he found someone who didn't just survive war, she used to walk straight into the deepest parts of it. And clearly, she hadn't planned on anyone recognizing her. When it was time to move, she tried to push herself up before anyone could help. She staggered, pain shooting through her leg, but she straightened anyway, jaw tight, posture perfect. The commander stepped forward. "Let us assist." She cut him off gently. "I can walk." It wasn't rudeness, it was instinct, the instinct of someone trained to never be a burden, someone who'd carried her own weight through missions far worse than this. The SEALs exchanged glances, not mocking, not judging, just honoring what she was clearly trying to maintain, her dignity. They gave her space but stayed close enough to catch her if she fell. She didn't. She moved with them like she'd been part of their unit for years, matching their pace, scanning terrain, tracking threats. Even wounded, she blended into their formation naturally, like her body remembered every trick of the battlefield. As they trekked out of the ruined compound, the commander finally asked, softly, "Why didn't you tell anyone who you were?" She stared ahead, voice steady, "Because I wasn't supposed to exist anymore. That line shut everyone up. There are soldiers, and then there are shadows." And on that dusty road, limping but unbroken, the SEALs realized they were walking beside one of the shadows. As the team made their way toward the extraction point, the last rays of sunlight cut across the rubble, painting the battlefield in gold and ash. She walked beside them wounded, quiet but unmistakably steady, her steps measured like each one belonged to a past she'd sworn never to revisit. The SEALs didn't crowd her, didn't question her, didn't push for details. They just kept pace, understanding in silence what words could never explain. She wasn't a civilian in the wrong place at the wrong time. She was a soldier forged in the kind of missions that never make the news, operations where only ghosts come back. The medic watched her from the side, still replaying every clue he'd missed earlier. The scars, the calm, the training hidden in her movements, now it all made sense. He knew operators with years of combat experience who didn't carry themselves the way she did while bleeding. She didn't cling to them for support. She didn't break down. She didn't flinch at distant gunfire. She stayed alert, focused, like a part of her had never truly left the battlefield. When the extraction bird finally dropped in, kicking up dust around them, the commander motioned her forward, offering the first seat. She hesitated for a heartbeat, eyes flicking across the team, maybe checking if they feared her or if they judged her. But all she saw was respect, real respect, the kind only earned in fire. She climbed aboard slowly, settling into the corner with the posture of someone who had flown out of war zones more times than she could count. As the helicopter lifted off, the SEALs realized they wouldn't forget this mission, not because of what they fought, but because of who they found. She didn't brag about her past. She didn't explain her legend. She didn't need to. Some warriors speak loudly. Others let the silence tell their story.